Welcome back, warrior. So, when you try to do those things that you want to do and that you have plans to do and things don't work the way that they're supposed to be working, well, that's what's happening. I have this thing where I believe that Satan can control technology, and I have yet someone to prove me wrong. Because anytime I'm trying to do something good, it doesn't work the way I plan. So now I have to use my laptop to get stuff because my iPad had 17% and it just decided to die on me. So I decided to start over, and then it died on me again. And then it's it just keeps cycling through over and over. And I'm like, okay, great. Thanks for wasting my time. So I'm like, let's just bust out my laptop then instead. And sometimes you just got to override Satan and his evil ways. And some people might think that I'm giving Satan too much credit. And, maybe I am. But if he can go into swine, then I'm guessing that he can totally go into my tech. Does that make sense? So I wouldn't put it past him, at least to try. And so maybe just the fact that he tries makes it go crazy. I don't know. So we're now in Words of Mormon, and I gave you the fun little tip at the end there for when I was reading Omni, and I found a little nugget from the Talking Scripture podcast, and I am going to include it in the comment or in the description in the previous video. So just pretty fun stuff. I like little nuggets like that, little rays of light, if you will, that we find along the way. Okay, that maybe other people have found that we haven't found, which is great because we want those, right? Okay, so the Come Follow Me manual says, the God will work through me as I follow his guidance. One reason the Lord inspired Mormon to include the small plates of Nephi in the Book of Mormon was because he knew that the first 116 translated pages would be lost. Why are you grateful that Mormon followed the Lord's instruction to include these writings? What reasons did Mormon give for including them? And when have you seen God working through you or others? Now, there's a lot of questions there, so write down the ones that you like. What I like about those is, why am I grateful for that Mormon followed the Lord's instruction to include these writings? Well, because then we wouldn't have them if he didn't. And I need them. Do you know how many times we read First Nephi all the way to Words of Mormon? I don't even know how many times I've read them, and they are the best words. That if you're gonna read any part of the Book of Mormon, I think that the beginning is so key in getting us the information that we need about Jesus Christ to help us come closer to him and to help us establish our testimonies. And so it is wisdom in the Lord that he included those for sure, especially since we've read them so many times, right? He must have known that we were going to read them so many times, that we would need them. And some people are like, if the Lord knew that was going to happen, why didn't he prevent stuff? Or why did, those kinds of comments and things. And it's kind of like, I'm trying to think of an example. I've been trying to think of an example since I was thinking about this. And it's kind of like my kids. I know that if I'm not home and they are left to their own devices, that they will turn on the TV and just watch and binge watch. Or they will play video games, okay? All day. This is based on prior experience of me knowing who they are, okay? This is based on me knowing what's out there available now in these days. It's also me knowing how Satan is going to tempt them. And it's not necessarily, in this case of the example I'm talking about, it's not necessarily bad or evil, or, there's not like, I mean, we could debate about there being long-term consequences, right? But because I'd rather them be like learning something that would be valuable to them for the rest of their lives. But, it's like, I have to let them choose to do things, and I have to let them feel like they're in charge of their lives as well, because otherwise then I'm like a dictator. And I have a lot of stuff that I dictate, and that's okay because I'm a parent and I need to do that, like chores and different things like that. But then there's certain times where I'm just like, I'm not going to micromanage their time, because I have time that I want to manage for myself. And so I let them manage their own time. And, they're in sports, and and they have piano, and they have those things, and so like I try to not micromanage even in their free time. And so I let them choose. So I know that those are the two things that they're going to choose when they get free time. And so I think that is kind of how the Lord knew what was going to happen with the plates, because he knows us, and he knew them, and he knew how Satan would tempt them, and he knows, and he knew that certain things were going to happen. And so because of those things that he knew, like obviously he doesn't want those things to happen. He just knows that there's like a 90% chance that those are going to happen. But he obviously hopes that they wouldn't, right? Like he hopes like, hey, I'm going to hope for the best, hope that you don't choose to watch, all kinds of binge watching TV, but I'm going to hope that you don't, but you probably will. And I will prepare for that. And, and so he has things in place for us because he knows us. And so anyway, I think it's wise for us to remember that our Father in heaven knows who we are better than we know who we are. And that he's going to set us up for success regardless of those times when we're going to make those bad choices. And I think that's so wise, right? Like, yeah, my kids are going to make that choice to watch those things, but because they're going to make those choices, I'm going to still try and set things up for them that will help them progress in life, right? And so even though they choose to watch those things, I'll set things up for them in a different way that will help them. Maybe I'll block the internet because I know they're going to go choose that. And then, but even then, I still don't want to have to do that. Like, that's way too much micromanagement for me. So anyway, that's something that I just wanted to throw out there. God knows who we are. It's just simple that way. And we don't need to overthink it. We don't need to overanalyze. We just need to accept the fact that he does know us. And if he knows us better than we know ourselves, how much more do we need to listen to him when he tells us things that are for our own good, right? Okay, so Mormon abridges their history into the plates of Mormon. He inserts the plates of Nephi into the abridgment. King Benjamin establishes peace in the land. So, let's see. Here we go. So now we're reading from the laptop because the iPad is crazy. All right, and now I'm Mormon, being about to deliver up the record, which I have been making into the hands of my son Moroni. Behold, I have witnessed almost all the destruction of my people, the Nephites. And this is just sad, right? And it is many hundred years after the coming of Christ that I deliver these records into the hands of my son. So this is now about 385 AD. That I deliver these records into the hands of my son, and it supposeth me that he will witness the entire destruction of my people. But may God grant that he may survive them, that he may write somewhat concerning them, and somewhat concerning Christ, that perhaps someday it may profit them. And someday it has. I will testify of that. It has profited profited me so much. So this is the first time that we hear from the prophet Mormon. Up until this point, we have been hearing directly from prophets who wrote upon the small plates, and now Mormon will continue the storyline using the large plates of Nephi. Mormon does not live during this time period. He will live hundreds of years later. See verse 2, right? Before the Nephites were completely destroyed, his mission was to compile all of the Nephite records into one record, which we now know as the Book of Mormon. Since he is transitioning from the small plates to the large plates, he writes to us and gives us an explanation. All right, verses 3 to 8. And now I speak somewhat concerning that which I have written, for after I had made an abridgment from the plates of Nephi down to the reign of this king Benjamin, of whom Amaleki spake, I searched among the records. And also, by the way, Amaleki, this is how I would say it in Spanish. So it's not like it's completely incorrect. It's just maybe in a different language, which is appropriate because we talk about the confusing languages, right? Okay. Of whom Amaleki spake, I searched among the records which had been delivered into my hands, and I found these plates which contained this small account of the prophets from Jacob down to the reign of this king Benjamin, and also many of the words of Nephi. So Mormon found the small plates. All right. And the things which are upon these plates pleasing me because of the prophecies of the coming of Christ and my fathers, knowing that many of them have been fulfilled. Yea, and I also know that as many things as have been prophesied concerning us down to this day have been fulfilled, and as many as go beyond this day must surely come to pass. Wherefore I choose these things to finish my record upon them, which remainder of my record I shall take from the plates of Nephi, and I cannot write 100th part of the things of my people. Well, that's good, because that's a lot of stuff, and I don't know if I could read more scripture, you know. But behold, I shall take small plates, these plates which contain these prophesyings and revelations, and put them with the remainder of my record, for they are choice unto me, and I know they will be choice unto my brethren. And I do this for a wise purpose, for thus it whispereth me according to the workings of the Spirit of the Lord, which is in me. And now I do not know all things, but the Lord knoweth all things which are to come. Wherefore he worketh it in me to do according to his will. And my prayer to God is concerning my brethren, that they may once again come to the knowledge of God, yea, the redemption of Christ, that they may once again be a delightsome people. Okay, so verses 3 to 8, Mormon had already abridged part of the Nephite history from the beginning, Lehi, to the time of King Benjamin. Then Mormon came across the small plates of Nephi, which covered the same time period. As Mormon searched these small plates of Nephi, they were full of prophecies, including many that had already been fulfilled. Mormon then took the small plates and put them with the plates he was abridging. This means there would have been a duplication in history covered. Mormon knew he was doing this for a wise purpose because the Spirit confirmed that to him, but he did not know exactly why. And I love that he says, for thus it whispereth me according to the workings of the Spirit of the Lord, which is in me. Sometimes the Spirit whispers to us and we think things are ridiculous. Why am I going to do that? That's stupid. But we do them anyway because we know that it's a prompting from the Lord. And when we do those things, isn't it amazing when you see why you did it and you're like, oh, the Lord totally knew that I needed to do this. And even though I thought it was going to be so dumb and redundant or whatever, that I'm so glad that I did that, right? Let's see, an example of this in my life. Let me pause for a second. Okay, so an example of this in my life is, I feel like I need to add this because it just helps reinforce this, right? So something that happened was somebody asked me about one of our neighbors, and I was like, well, I don't even know her that well, and I don't know who you're talking about. Maybe it's not even the right person. Anyway, so I had this crazy idea. I was like, what if I just ask her to come to lunch with us. And I was and I could invite my neighbor and she could talk to her and they could, maybe talk and figure things out. Anyway, so I was like, but that's a dumb idea because I don't even know this gal and she's claiming all these things. And I'm like, maybe it's a bad idea to really get everyone together and go to lunch. But I was like, it's fine. I will just present the idea because I had this whisper that the Lord wanted me to say. And sometimes you don't even know that it's the Lord and you just think it's your own idea until later. Anyway, so I got the dumb idea and I was like, fine. So I said it and I was like, hey, maybe we should go to lunch and you could talk to her yourself and figure stuff out. Anyways, we did. And it was crazy how, because my friend is my neighbor is not a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which is fine. She's awesome. I love her to death. And, but I don't know her that well. I know little bit about her, but I still love her to death because she's so sweet and just anytime we talk, but I rarely talk to her. Anyway, it's weird. I'm kind of an introvert, but also an extrovert. But I'm kind of a shut-in because I don't go out because it's too cold here in Utah. And then, anyway, that's a lot of information you probably didn't need to know. But so anyway, so this gal who was like, yeah, make an introduction. Let's go to lunch. That sounds fantastic, right? So I was like, okay, sounds dumb, but okay, whatever. Maybe won't be weird. And maybe my friend, my neighbor won't think she's weird. And turns out she did not think she was weird. She is super besties now. And they are chatting it up almost once a week since we had our lunch thing. And, turns out that she knows somebody else also that she knows. And I don't know that person, but, that was the person that she was trying to actually get to know because turns out that, she was coming to church and, she was really offended by the singles groups and population that she was being a part of, and she got really offended by several members and she chose not to come back because she's like, oh, I'm not doing this if this is what's going to happen. And so it makes sense. I wouldn't either. And so especially since she was just a newly converted member. Anyway, so my friend, I guess I could call her my friend, my new friend that I made, who's not my neighbor, but who came to lunch. And she was able to talk to her and convince her that it's the people that were making the bad choices and it's not Christ, and that the gospel is true, but sometimes people are a little bit corrupt and still, don't know how to act, really. I mean, honestly, sometimes I wonder about us. And so anyway, so she has convinced her that she needs to go back to church. And anyway, so I think it's so great. Now this gal is now super good friends with not just my neighbor who is not a member, but also this other gal who was not active and is going to go back to church. And it was just from my idea to have lunch because I wouldn't have thought of the idea because I never see my neighbor at all. And so it was hard to figure out when to go, and she works a lot. Anyway, so yeah, it was so cool that we were able to do that. And I was just like, this is crazy because now this gal is able to have contact with those gals because I was willing to speak up and do a lunch, right? And kind of make that introduction. And I thought it was a stupid idea at the time, but now it's not a super dumb idea, and it was the best idea that I could have come up with at the time. And that idea was not my own, and it had to be from the Lord. Why? Because the Lord knows all things. That's what That's what Mormon says. And now I do not know all things, but the Lord knoweth all things which are to come. Wherefore he worketh in me to do according to his will. And so sometimes those ideas will sound dumb for us because the Lord's ways are higher than our ways. And sometimes higher ways sound stupid to people who are not that high, if that makes sense. So anyway, like long story for that, but just had to share. Okay, so where were we? Okay, so over 1,000 years after Mormon lived, Joseph Smith began the translation of the Book of Mormon. He first translated the Book of Lehi. Joseph had 116 pages of translated scripture when Martin Harris begged Joseph to let him take the manuscript, not the plates, and show his family. Joseph asked God three times, if Martin could take this manuscript, and God finally gave him permission. Those 116 pages were then lost in the process, and it was revealed to Joseph that wicked men were in possession of them. Okay, so here's what's interesting. I don't necessarily think that that God gave him permission. I think it was one of those things where your kids ask you to do things so many times that you're just like, fine, go do it. Okay, I said no. I've got a bad feeling about this, but you have free agency. So, do what you want to do. Right. And that's, to me, how it went down. And Joseph was, okay, hold on one second. So, and Joseph was just like, okay, I'll do it, because God was like, just, you get to choose. Right. And so that's why those 116 pages were lost. Now, the Lord then told Joseph not to retranslate the plates, but to translate the record on the small plates of Nephi, which contain the same history. So it appears that the wicked men had altered the translations, so a retranslation would not match. However, God is all-knowing, and his wisdom is greater than the cunning of the devil, right? So God had planned for this all along. Now, remember, God said no first, and then Joseph's the one that begged, and then God was like, fine, you're going to do whatever you want to do anyway. You can, just do it, right? So it wasn't like God gave him permission, okay? But it was like Joseph took his free agency and did that. Like we all want to have that control over our agency. And whenever our parents tell us not to do something, what do we want to do? What do we want to do? We want to go against what they say, right? And so it's so similar to what we would have done anyway. And it's so easy for all of us to put ourselves in his shoes and be like, yep, I would have done that. Like, no joke, when my mom tells me to do something, I don't do it. Or I fight so hard to not do it. And sometimes I'm like, don't tell me to do this because I want to do it on my own and I'm going to do it if you could just not say a word. There's a quote set from Elder Jeffrey R. Holland given at a CES symposium, August 9th, 1994. It says, at least six times in the Book of Mormon, the phrase for a wise purpose is used in reference to the making, writing, and preserving of the small plates of Nephi. You and I know the wise purpose. The most obvious one was to compensate for the loss of the earlier mentioned 116 pages of manuscript. But it strikes me that there is a wiser purpose than that. The key to such a suggestion of a wiser purpose is in verse 45 of the Doctrine and Covenants, section 10. As the Lord instructs Joseph, he says, behold, there are many things engraven upon the small plates of Nephi, which do throw greater views upon my gospel. So clearly, this was not tit for tat, this for that. You give me 116 pages of manuscript and I'll give you 142 pages of printed text. Not so. We got back more than we lost, and it was known from the beginning that it would be so. It was for a wiser purpose. Excuse me. We do not know exactly what we missed in the 116 pages, but we do know that what we received on the small plates was the personal declarations of three great witnesses, Nephi, Jacob, and Isaiah. 3 of the great doctrinal voices of the Book of Mormon testifying that Jesus is the Christ, end quote. Oh, love that. Also, as I was reading this, it made me think about those plates that were engraven. And it, makes me sad that they had to lose all those. And that we don't have those. However, I know that Nephi and I know that he's not sad that he wrote them, right? It helped him become who he was by writing on those plates. When I write in my journal, I feel those words more completely, more truthfully in my heart and in my soul. And so when he says for a wise purpose or a wiser purpose, remember, of course, God's trying to make sure that we all come unto him, but he was trying to convert Nephi through this whole process as well. And he wanted to keep Nephi, because how awesome is Nephi, right? And he wanted to make sure he didn't lose Nephi because his brothers were crazy. And so I think it's so cool and to see, and maybe, and Lehi, we probably lost things that Lehi wrote. And what about those things that Lehi wrote, and how awesome Lehi became because he was able to write those things too. And so Lehi and Nephi, and who knows, maybe Nephi, it's Nephi did have to write more, right? Because I remember in scripture, he says something like, I don't know why I'm rewriting this kind of thing, but the Lord does, so I'm doing it. And so, but those writings had to happen to help those men become who they are, right? Or who they were to us. And of course, what if those pages would have remained in there for us? Would we have tried to read it even more? Or would we be so bored from reading them, right? So sometimes simplifying things are going to be better in the end because it'll make more of an impact. If it was longer, would we read it still? Would we still read the Book of Mormon as many times as we have, or would it affect us the same way? So there's those things that you can consider when we're reading it. Okay, verses 9 to 11. And now I, Mormon, proceed to finish out my record, which I take from the plates of Nephi, and I make it according to the knowledge and understanding which God has given me. Wherefore it came to pass that after Amaleki had delivered up these plates into the hands of King Benjamin, he took them and put them with the other plates, which contained records, which had been handed down by the kings from generation to generation until the days of King Benjamin. And they were handed down from King Benjamin from generation to generation until they had fallen into my hands. And I, Mormon, pray to God that they may be preserved from this time henceforth. And I know that they will be preserved, for there are great things written upon them, out of which my people and their brethren shall be judged at the great and last day, according to the word of God, which is written. Also, imagine if they hadn't written those, or imagine if those plates hadn't been included then, or the first plates hadn't been added, and then the first plates that would have been there were the Nephi and Jacob and records, then we would have lost those. And that would have been not good, So yeah, anyway, so many good things. So the kings had also been keeping a record, and King Benjamin took the small plates and put them with the other plates. And as far as we know, only the large plates of Nephi will now continue to be updated. An article for BYU Religious Studies Center explains the large plates of Nephi like this. The large plates of Nephi underwent certain changes as they were passed down through a long line of historians. In their first stage, they were an overall civil and religious record kept by the prophet King Nephi. In their second stage, which lasted for several hundred years, they were strictly a civil record. In their third stage, which began near the opening of the book of Mosiah, they were restored to their original composite civil and religious character and remained so until Mormon's day. And this is by Eldon Ricks, The Small Plates of Nephi and the Words of Mormon, BYU Religious Studies Center. Okay. Okay, and now we're going to read 12 to 18. And now concerning this King Benjamin, he had somewhat of contentions among his own people, and it came to pass that the armies of the Lamanites, so his own people were the Mulekites and Nephites, okay? And it came to pass that the armies of the Lamanites came down out of the land of Nephi to battle against his people. But behold, King Benjamin gathered together his armies and did stand against them. And he did fight with the strength of his own arm, with the sword of Laban. And in the strength of the Lord, they did contend against their enemies until they had slain many thousands of the Lamanites. And it came to pass that they did contend against the Lamanites until they had driven them out of all the lands of their inheritance. And it came to pass that after there had been false Christs and their mouths had been shut, and they punished according to their crimes, and after there had been false prophets and false preachers and teachers among the people, and all these having been punished according to their crimes, and after there having been much contention and many dissensions away unto the Lamanites, behold, it came to pass that King Benjamin, with the assistance of the holy prophets who were among his people, for behold, King Benjamin was a holy man, and he did reign over his people in righteousness, and there were many holy men in the land, and they did speak the word of God with power and with authority, and they did use much sharpness because of the stiff-neckedness of the people. Wherefore, with the help of these, King Benjamin, by laboring with all the might of his body and the faculty of his whole soul, and also the prophets, did once more establish peace in the land. Okay, so before Mormon begins the book of Mosiah, he gives us an overview of the current conditions among the Nephites. There had been many contentions among the Nephites/Mulekites. The Lamanites had come to battle against them, but the Nephites withstood them in the strength of the Lord, and King Benjamin also fought in the battle. There had been false Christs, false prophets, and false preachers and teachers. There had been Nephites that left to join the Lamanites. That's sad. And there were holy prophets among the Nephites. King Benjamin was a holy man who labored with all the might of his body and the faculty of his whole soul. King Benjamin was an example of powerful, effective, and Christ-like leadership. He did not tell the Nephites to risk their lives in battle without risking his own. He was a holy man, so he made holy leadership choices, and because he combined his efforts with the prophets' efforts, together they brought peace. So Joseph Smith taught Egypt, Babylon, Greece, Persia, Carthage, Rome, each was raised to dignity amidst the clash of arms and the din of war, and whilst their triumphant leaders led forth their victorious armies to glory and victory, their ears were saluted with the groans of the dying and the misery and distress of the human family. Before them the earth was a paradise, and behind them a desolate wilderness. Their kingdoms were founded in carnage and bloodshed, and sustained by oppression, tyranny, and despotism. The designs of God, on the other hand, have been to promote the universal good of the universal world, to establish peace and goodwill among men, to promote the principles of eternal truth, to bring about a state of things that shall unite man to his fellow man, cause the world to beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. End quote. Okay, Joseph Smith, Teachings of the Prophet Joseph Smith, page 248. Okay, so there's two read it livets to end our to end our reading for today. And this one's from verse 7. It says, Mormon's life has taught him that he doesn't know all things, but the Lord does. Mormon trusts this and knows the Lord will work in him according to his will. The Lord knows all things. Let him work in you. Love that. And then verses 17 to 18. King Benjamin establishes peace in the land by laboring with all the might of his body and the faculty of his whole soul, and with the help of many holy men. We also live in a time of many holy men. Live with the help of these. Ooh, that is so good. Which holy men do you immediately think of when you hear the words holy men? I think of prophets, apostles, church leaders, and things like that. There was a time after D-Day or Discovery Day that I thought all men are perverts and only think of one thing and, all that. But I have learned through my time and through my healing that not all men have the same weaknesses, and not all men have chosen to succumb to those weaknesses, and that there are men out there, believe it or not, that are trying their best to stay pure and righteous, and that there is still hope for the single women out there who need a good man, who are good holy men, just like how they are described here, and to not give up finding them, because I'm trying to raise holy men also, and like they know the downfall of, or they know the consequences that would come from, pornography and things. And so I hope that they will take their dad's example and how it affected our family, and be able to rise above that and be able to stay pure and stay holy, and be able to find those women who have also stayed pure and stayed holy, so that they can become amazing companions, eternal companions for forever. And then hopefully provide us with some holy grandkids, right? So anyway, that is, I guess, a hope. I try not to make it an expectation, because when we have expectations, we can be let down, right? And if you have expectations from other people, people can let us down. And so I'm trying really hard to not have that expectation, so that if they do choose something different, that I'll probably be sad, but that I'll be able to continue to love them no matter what, right? Because that's what it's about. I want to be able to live with my family forever. And I want it to be a blessing to them and not a threat. Let's live forever, right? Anyways, okay, so that's it for today. And this is our Words of Mormon. Did we say that? That's where we were, Words of Mormon. Okay, and then until tomorrow, we will be reading first book of Mosiah. So that's going to be amazing. But until tomorrow, stay strong, warrior.